Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stood in the muddy courtyard at dawn. The other recruits around him looked just as tired and dirty. 3 months into Royal Guard training, and every day felt like climbing a mountain with rocks in his backpack. "Thompson," Sergeant Williams barked across the yard. "Your sword work yesterday was pathetic. A palace dog could fight better than you." Marcus felt his cheeks burn red. The other recruits tried not to look at him, but he could feel their eyes anyway. Some of them probably agreed with the sergeant. Marcus had always been the weakest fighter in the group. He came from a small farming village where his family grew wheat and raised chickens. His hands were better with tools than weapons, but when the Royal Guard recruitment notice came to his village, his mother had pushed him to try. "You're smart and honest, Marcus," she had said. "Those are the qualities a real guard needs." Now standing in the cold morning air, Marcus wondered if his mother was wrong. Intelligence didn't help when you were facing a sword. Honesty didn't make your muscles stronger or your reflexes faster. The training master, Captain Hayes, walked into the courtyard. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of fighting. Everyone respected Captain Hayes because he had served 3 different kings and never lost a single battle. "Today we practice mounted combat," Captain Hayes announced. "You'll ride at full speed and hit targets with your lance. Anyone who misses more than half their targets will run 20 laps around the castle walls." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had grown up around farm horses, but war horses were completely different animals. They were bigger, faster, and much harder to control. In previous mounted training sessions, he had barely managed to stay on the horse, let alone hit any targets. The first recruit, James, mounted his horse smoothly. He had grown up in a wealthy family and learned to ride before he could properly walk. James galloped down the field and hit 4 out of 5 targets perfectly. The other recruits cheered. One by one, each recruit took their turn. Most of them hit at least 3 targets. A few missed badly and would be running laps later. Then it was Marcus's turn. He approached the large brown war horse assigned to him. The animal snorted and stamped its feet impatiently. Marcus took a deep breath and pulled himself into the saddle. His hands shook slightly as he gripped the reins. "Whenever you're ready, Thompson," Captain Hayes called out. Marcus kicked the horse gently, but the animal barely moved. Some recruits started laughing. He kicked harder, and suddenly the horse shot forward like an arrow from a bow. Marcus nearly fell backward but managed to grab the horse's mane to steady himself. The first target approached quickly. Marcus tried to lower his lance, but he was bouncing so much in the saddle that he could barely aim. The wooden target flew past him untouched. The second target came just as fast, and again Marcus missed completely. By the third target, sweat was pouring down his face. The horse was moving so fast that everything around him was a blur. He closed his eyes for just a moment, took a deep breath, and tried to remember what his father had taught him about focus when working on the farm. When he opened his eyes, the 4th target was right in front of him. Without thinking too much, he thrust the lance forward. To his surprise, the wooden tip struck the target with a solid thud.
He had hit it.
But there was no time to celebrate because the 5th and final target was already approaching. This time, Marcus didn't overthink it. He kept his eyes on the target, steadied his breathing, and thrust the lance forward with all his strength. Another hit. As he slowed the horse down at the end of the field, Marcus couldn't believe what had happened. He had hit 2 out of 5 targets. It wasn't the best performance, but it wasn't the worst either. More importantly, he had finally started to understand how to work with the horse instead of fighting against it. Captain Hayes walked over as Marcus dismounted. The captain's face showed no emotion, which made Marcus nervous. Had he done something wrong? "Thompson," the captain said quietly, "you started poorly, but you finished strong. That tells me something important about your character. A man who can learn and adapt under pressure might just survive in this job." Marcus felt a small spark of hope in his chest. Maybe he wasn't completely hopeless after all. Maybe there was still a chance he could become a real Royal Guard. That evening, as he cleaned his equipment in the barracks, Marcus thought about his village and his family. He missed his mother's cooking and his father's quiet wisdom. But for the first time since arriving at the castle, he felt like he might actually belong here. The other recruits were talking and joking around their bunks, but Marcus focused on polishing his sword until it gleamed in the lamplight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests, and new opportunities to prove himself. He was determined to be ready. 6 weeks later, Marcus faced his biggest challenge yet. The final combat examination would determine which recruits became Royal Guards and which ones went home empty-handed. Out of the original 50 recruits, only 20 remained, and only 12 would be chosen. The examination took place in the great hall where the king himself sometimes held court. High stone walls rose up around them, and banners with the royal coat of arms hung from the ceiling. Marcus had never been in such a grand room before, and it made him feel very small. Field Marshal Victoria Sterling entered the hall with 3 other senior officers. She was the highest-ranking military officer in the entire kingdom, a woman who had earned her position through decades of brilliant strategy and fearless leadership in battle. Her reputation was legendary, and some people said she was tougher than any man in the army. Marcus had only seen the field marshal from a distance before. Up close, she was shorter than he expected, but something about her presence commanded immediate respect. Her uniform was perfectly pressed and her boots gleamed like mirrors. When she looked at the recruits, her gray eyes seemed to see right through them. "Gentlemen," the field marshal spoke in a clear, strong voice, "today you will face 3 tests. First, individual combat against one of my officers. Second, a written examination about royal protocol and military strategy. Third, a test of judgment under pressure." She paused and looked at each recruit individually. When her eyes met Marcus's, he felt his heart skip a beat. "I will personally observe every test. Those who pass will serve the crown with honor. Those who fail will leave immediately and never speak of what they learned here." The first test began right away. Each recruit had to fight a senior guard in single combat using wooden swords. The fights were brutal and fast. James, who had always been the best fighter, lasted almost 5 minutes before being defeated. Most recruits were beaten within 2 minutes. Marcus watched nervously as his turn approached. His opponent was Sergeant Rodriguez, a compact man with quick reflexes and 20 years of experience. Rodriguez had defeated the last 3 recruits without even breathing hard. When Marcus stepped into the fighting circle, some of the other recruits shook their heads sadly. They expected this to be over quickly and not in Marcus's favor. Rodriguez smiled and raised his wooden sword. "Nothing personal, farm boy. Just try to make it interesting." Marcus lifted his own weapon and tried to remember everything Captain Hayes had taught him. He knew he couldn't match Rodriguez's speed or experience, but maybe he could use his brain instead of just his muscles. Rodriguez attacked immediately, his sword cutting through the air in a deadly arc. Marcus barely managed to block the strike, and the impact sent vibrations up his arm. The sergeant followed up with 3 more quick attacks, each one faster than the last. Instead of trying to attack back, Marcus focused entirely on defense. He blocked, dodged, and stepped backward, letting Rodriguez come to him. The sergeant was clearly the better fighter, but Marcus noticed something interesting. Rodriguez was left-handed, and he had a habit of dropping his guard slightly after his strongest attacks. For 3 long minutes, Marcus did nothing but survive. Rodriguez grew more aggressive, trying to end the fight quickly. Sweat beaded on both their foreheads, and Marcus could hear his own heart pounding in his ears. Then Rodriguez made his biggest attack yet, a powerful overhead swing that would have ended the fight if it connected. Marcus saw the opening he had been waiting for. As Rodriguez's sword came down, Marcus stepped to the side and thrust his wooden blade forward. The tip of his sword touched Rodriguez's chest, just as the sergeant's blade whistled past his ear. According to the rules, any solid hit to the body meant victory. The hall fell completely silent. Nobody could believe what they had just seen. Marcus had defeated one of the best fighters in the Royal Guard. Rodriguez stepped back and lowered his weapon. Instead of looking angry, he was smiling. "Well played, Thompson. You fought smart, not just hard. That's the mark of a real warrior." Field Marshal Sterling made a note on her paper but showed no emotion. Marcus couldn't tell if she was impressed or disappointed. The written examination came next. Marcus actually felt confident about this part. The questions covered military history, royal protocol, and strategic thinking. Having grown up reading every book he could find in his village, Marcus finished the test faster than most other recruits. But the third test was something none of them had expected. Field Marshal Sterling led all the remaining recruits outside to the castle courtyard. In the center of the yard sat a simple wooden table with a single piece of paper on it. "This paper contains military secrets that could harm the kingdom if they fell into enemy hands," the field marshal explained. "I am giving each of you the chance to read it. However, I'm also offering each recruit 50 gold pieces to leave right now, before seeing what's written on that paper." 50 gold pieces was more money than Marcus had ever seen in his life. It was enough to buy land in his village and support his family for years. Around him, several recruits stepped forward immediately to take the money, but Marcus remained still. Something about this test bothered him. If the paper really contained dangerous secrets, why would the field marshal let untrained recruits see it? And why offer money to leave when they were so close to completing their training? One by one, more recruits took the gold and left the courtyard. Soon, only Marcus and 3 others remained. Field Marshal Sterling walked to the table and picked up the paper. She held it up so they could all see it clearly. The paper was completely blank. "Congratulations," she said with the first smile Marcus had seen from her. "You 4 have just passed the most important test of all. Loyalty cannot be bought with gold, and a true royal guard must be incorruptible." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed immediately by pride. He had trusted his instincts, and they had been correct. More importantly, he had proven to himself that he could resist temptation even when it would have solved all his family's financial problems. Field Marshal Sterling looked at each of the 4 remaining recruits. "Tomorrow you will take your oath as royal guards. Tonight get some rest. Your real training begins at dawn." 2 years passed since Marcus took his oath as a royal guard, but each day still felt like a test he might fail. While his 3 fellow graduates had been assigned to prestigious positions, Marcus found himself working the least important shifts in the most boring locations. He spent his days guarding empty corridors, checking storage rooms that nobody ever visited, and standing watch over unused gates. The other guards called it punishment duty, though Marcus had never been officially punished for anything. He began to wonder if Field Marshal Sterling regretted choosing him. The castle was enormous, with hundreds of rooms, dozens of staircases, and secret passages that even some longtime guards didn't know about. Marcus used his quiet shifts to explore and learn every corner of the building. He memorized which floors creaked, which doors stuck in damp weather, and which windows offered the best views of approaching visitors. His fellow guards often made jokes about his obsession with details. "Thompson memorizes everything except how to get promoted," they would laugh during meals. Marcus tried to smile along, but the comment stung. One rainy Tuesday morning, Marcus was assigned to guard the library tower, a duty so boring that most guards considered it a form of torture. The Royal Library contained thousands of old books that nobody read anymore, and visitors came maybe once a month. As Marcus stood at his post, he heard unusual sounds coming from inside the library. Soft footsteps, whispered voices, and the gentle rustling of papers. Since no visits were scheduled for that day, he became curious and concerned. Marcus quietly pushed open the heavy wooden door and peered inside. 3 men in dark clothes were searching through documents near the restricted section, where important government papers were kept. They definitely weren't supposed to be there. One of the intruders looked up and saw Marcus in the doorway. "Just a guard," the man whispered to his companions. "We can handle this quietly." The 3 men moved toward Marcus with confident smiles. They were probably expecting him to run away or call for help. Instead, Marcus stepped fully into the library and closed the door behind him. "You gentlemen need to leave immediately," Marcus said in a calm but firm voice. "This area is restricted," the largest intruder laughed. "Farm boy, you're outnumbered 3 to 1. Just walk away and pretend you never saw us. Nobody has to get hurt." Marcus had spent 2 years being underestimated, and he was tired of it. More importantly, these men were threatening the security of the kingdom. That made them his responsibility. "I can't do that," Marcus replied, drawing his sword. "You're under arrest for trespassing in a restricted area." What happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus himself. All those hours of extra practice, all those nights spent training alone while other guards relaxed, suddenly paid off in ways he never expected. The first attacker rushed forward with a dagger, but Marcus sidestepped easily and used the pommel of his sword to strike the man's wrist. The dagger clattered to the floor and the attacker stumbled backward, clutching his injured hand. The second man tried to circle around behind Marcus, but Marcus had spent 2 years learning every inch of the library. Without looking, he knew exactly where the man was moving. Marcus spun around and caught the attacker off guard with a quick thrust that stopped just short of his throat. "Don't move," Marcus warned, and something in his voice made the man freeze completely. The third intruder, the one who had called him farm boy, was backing toward a window. "You got lucky, guard. But this isn't over." "Actually, it is over," Marcus said quietly. He had noticed something the intruders missed. During the fight, One of them had knocked over a special candle that was used to signal emergencies. The smoke from that candle would alert other guards that something was wrong in the library. Sure enough, Marcus could hear boots running up the tower stairs. Within moments, 6 royal guards burst through the door with weapons drawn. Situation under control, Marcus reported calmly. 3 intruders attempted to access restricted documents. All captured, no injuries. Captain Hayes, who led the response team, looked around the library in amazement. Marcus was standing perfectly calm while 3 dangerous men sat on the floor with their hands behind their heads. Important government documents were scattered everywhere, but none seemed to be missing. "Thompson," Captain Hayes said with obvious respect, "how did you handle 3 trained fighters by yourself?" Marcus shrugged. "They underestimated me, sir. People often do." Later that afternoon, Marcus was called to Field Marshal Sterling's office for the first time since his graduation ceremony. He knocked on the heavy wooden door and waited for permission to enter. "Come in, Guard Thompson." The Field Marshal's office was smaller than Marcus expected, but every item in it was perfectly organized. Maps covered one wall, showing the kingdom's borders and important military positions. A single window offered a view of the training grounds where new recruits were practicing sword work. Field Marshal Sterling sat behind a simple wooden desk, reading a report. She looked up when Marcus entered and gestured for him to sit in the chair across from her. "I've received Captain Hayes' report about this morning's incident," she began. "Quite impressive work. Thank you, ma'am. I was just doing my duty." The Field Marshal smiled slightly. "Just doing your duty?" "Thompson, those 3 men were professional spies sent by a neighboring kingdom. They had detailed knowledge of castle security and access to restricted areas. They should have been impossible for one guard to handle alone." Marcus felt his cheeks redden. He hadn't realized the intruders were that dangerous. "For the past 2 years," Field Marshal Sterling continued, "I've been watching your progress very carefully. You've been assigned to what others call boring duties, but I call them learning opportunities. You've used that time to become the most knowledgeable guard in the entire castle." Marcus blinked in surprise. "Ma'am? You know every corridor, every room, every possible security weakness in this building. You've studied royal protocol until you could recite it backwards. You've trained harder than guards with twice your experience, all while never complaining about your assignments." The Field Marshal stood up and walked to her window. "A royal guard's most important quality isn't skill with a sword, Thompson. It's character. Today you proved you have both." 3 months after the library incident, Marcus's life changed dramatically. Instead of guarding empty hallways, he was assigned to the personal security detail for visiting dignitaries and foreign ambassadors. The promotion came with better pay, nicer quarters, and the respect of his fellow guards. But the new position also brought new challenges that tested everything Marcus had learned about diplomacy, protocol, and human nature. His first major assignment was protecting Ambassador Chen, a trade representative from the Eastern Empire. Ambassador Chen was visiting to negotiate a new agreement about silk and spice imports. But tensions were high because recent border disputes had made both kingdoms suspicious of each other. Marcus was part of a 4-guard detail assigned to ensure Ambassador Chen's safety during his week-long stay. The team was led by Guard Captain Morrison, an experienced officer who had protected dozens of foreign visitors over the years. "Listen carefully, Thompson," Captain Morrison explained during their briefing. "Ambassador Chen's safety is our primary responsibility, but we also need to observe everything he does and everyone he meets. The Field Marshal wants detailed reports about his activities." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the dual role of protector and spy, but he understood the necessity. International politics required careful attention to every detail, especially when dealing with kingdoms that might become enemies. The first 3 days passed smoothly. Ambassador Chen attended official meetings during the day and cultural events in the evenings. He was polite, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in improving relations between the 2 kingdoms. But on the 4th day, something unexpected happened that would test Marcus's judgment and loyalty in ways he never anticipated. Marcus was standing guard outside Ambassador Chen's guest quarters when he heard voices speaking in the Eastern Empire's language through the thick wooden door. His 2 years of studying different languages during his quiet guard shifts allowed him to understand most of what was being said. Ambassador Chen was speaking with someone else, and they were discussing military positions along the border. The conversation included details about fort locations, troop numbers, and supply routes that could be valuable to enemy forces. Marcus faced an immediate dilemma. Should he report this conversation to Captain Morrison right away? Should he try to hear more details first? Or was there an innocent explanation that he was missing? Instead of rushing to judgment, Marcus decided to gather more information. Over the next hour, he carefully listened to several more conversations. What he heard changed everything he thought he knew about Ambassador Chen's mission. The ambassador wasn't sharing military secrets with enemy agents. He was actually meeting with refugees from his own kingdom, people who had fled political persecution and were seeking asylum. The military information was being used to help plan safe escape routes for other refugees still trapped in dangerous areas. Ambassador Chen was risking his own career and safety to help people his own government considered criminals. The trade negotiations were real, but they were also providing cover for a humanitarian rescue operation. Marcus realized he was witnessing something that could destroy Ambassador Chen's life if reported incorrectly, but could also be a genuine security threat if he was wrong about the ambassador's motives. That evening, Marcus requested a private meeting with Captain Morrison. They met in a small office away from other guards and potential listeners. "Captain, I need to report something unusual about Ambassador Chen's activities." Marcus began carefully. Captain Morrison leaned forward with interest. "What kind of unusual activities?" Marcus took a deep breath and made a decision that could affect his entire career. "Sir, I believe Ambassador Chen is conducting unauthorized meetings in his quarters. However, based on what I've observed, I believe these meetings are humanitarian in nature, not military or political threats." He then explained everything he had seen and heard, being careful to distinguish between facts he was certain about and conclusions he had drawn from limited information. Captain Morrison listened quietly until Marcus finished speaking. Then he asked several detailed questions about timing, participants, and specific conversations. "Thompson," the captain said finally, "you've presented me with a very complex situation. Your recommendation is that we continue monitoring Ambassador Chen, but don't report his refugee assistance activities to higher authorities?" "Yes, sir. I believe he's trying to help innocent people, not harm our kingdom. But I also think we should continue watching carefully to make sure my assessment is correct." Captain Morrison was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. "You realize that if you're wrong about this, both of our careers could be over. And if you're right, we're essentially helping Ambassador Chen hide his activities from our own superiors." Marcus nodded. "I understand, sir. But I believe protecting innocent people is more important than following procedures blindly." The next morning, Captain Morrison made an unusual decision. Instead of reporting Marcus's observations through normal channels, he requested a private meeting with Field Marshal Sterling. Marcus wasn't present for that meeting, but its results became clear over the following days. Ambassador Chen's movements were monitored more discreetly, and additional resources were quietly provided to help verify the true nature of his activities. By the end of the week, it became clear that Marcus's assessment had been correct. Ambassador Chen was indeed helping refugees, and his trade negotiations were legitimate attempts to improve relations between the kingdoms. On Ambassador Chen's final day, he specifically requested a private moment with Marcus before departing. "Guard Thompson," the ambassador said in accented but clear language, "I want to thank you for your discretion this week. I know you were aware of my additional activities, and I appreciate your wisdom in handling the situation appropriately." Marcus was surprised that Ambassador Chen knew about his surveillance. "Sir, I was just trying to do what seemed right." Ambassador Chen smiled sadly. "Sometimes doing what is right requires great courage, especially when it conflicts with what is expected. You have that courage, young man. Your kingdom is fortunate to have you." After Ambassador Chen's departure, Captain Morrison approached Marcus with news that would change his life again. "Thompson, Field Marshal Sterling wants to see you immediately. She's been following this situation very closely, and she has some things to discuss with you about your future as a royal guard." Marcus walked toward Field Marshal Sterling's office with his heart pounding harder than it had during any combat training. The Ambassador Chen situation had ended well, but he wasn't sure if his decisions had impressed his superiors or disappointed them. When he knocked on the familiar wooden door, the Field Marshal's voice called for him to enter immediately. Marcus stepped inside and stood at attention, waiting for whatever judgment was about to come. Field Marshal Sterling was not alone. 3 other senior officers sat around her desk, including General Harrison, the king's chief military advisor. Marcus had never been in the same room with such high-ranking officials, and their serious expressions made him nervous. "Guard Thompson," Field Marshal Sterling began. "Please sit down. We have some important matters to discuss." Marcus took the offered chair, trying to keep his face calm while his mind raced through possibilities. Had he made a terrible mistake with Ambassador Chen? Was his career about to end before it really began? "The Ambassador Chen assignment has been evaluated by military intelligence," General Harrison said in a deep, authoritative voice. "Your handling of the situation demonstrates qualities we rarely see in someone so young." Marcus blinked in surprise. That sounded positive, but he wasn't sure yet. Field Marshal Sterling opened a file on her desk. "Thompson, in 3 years of service, you've shown exceptional judgment, loyalty, and discretion. You've also demonstrated an unusual ability to see beyond the obvious and understand complex situations." She looked up from the file. "These qualities make you suitable for a very special assignment. However, this assignment comes with significant risks and responsibilities that go far beyond normal guard duties." General Harrison leaned forward. "What we're about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. Before we continue, you must understand that accepting this assignment will change your life permanently. You cannot discuss it with family, friends, or other guards. Are you prepared for that level of commitment?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Whatever they were offering, it was serious and dangerous. But he had spent his entire career proving he could handle responsibility. "Yes, sir. I'm prepared." Field Marshal Sterling exchanged glances with the other officers before continuing. "We want you to join a special unit that handles the kingdom's most sensitive security situations. You would work directly for me, with access to information that even senior officers don't see. The work involves protecting not just individual people, but protecting the entire kingdom from threats that most citizens never know about." General Harrison added, "Enemy spies, internal conspiracies, assassination attempts against the royal family. Every assignment could be your last." Marcus thought about his family back in the farming village, his mother who was so proud of his success, his father who had taught him the importance of duty and honor. Taking this position would mean he could never tell them about his real work or share his achievements with them. But he also thought about Ambassador Chen, about the refugees who needed protection, about all the innocent people who depended on the kingdom's security without even knowing it. "What exactly would be my role in this unit?" Marcus asked. "You would be what we call a shadow guardian," Field Marshal Sterling explained. "Sometimes you'll work undercover, pretending to be a merchant or traveler while investigating threats. Sometimes you'll protect important people without them knowing you exist. Sometimes you'll gather intelligence in situations too dangerous for regular military personnel. The training is extensive and difficult," another officer added. "Advanced combat techniques, multiple languages, espionage methods, diplomatic protocol for 12 different kingdoms. Many candidates don't survive the first year." Marcus considered everything they had told him. This was an incredible opportunity, a chance to serve his kingdom at the highest levels and use all his skills in meaningful ways. But it also meant leaving behind the normal life he had imagined for himself. "How long would this assignment last?" he asked. "Permanently," General Harrison replied bluntly. "Shadow Guardians serve until they die or become unable to continue. There's no returning to regular guard duty once you know what you'll know." The room fell silent while Marcus wrestled with the decision. Everything in his life had led to this moment, all the training and testing and proving himself. But accepting meant crossing a line he could never uncross. Finally, Marcus looked up at Field Marshal Sterling. "Ma'am, when would this assignment begin?" She smiled for the first time during the meeting. "Your training starts tomorrow if you accept. But Thompson, I want you to think carefully tonight before giving your final answer. This decision will affect everything in your life." Marcus stood up and saluted properly. "With respect, ma'am, I don't need to think about it. I've spent 3 years learning to serve my kingdom. Now you're offering me the chance to serve it in the most important way possible. I accept." General Harrison nodded approvingly. "Good man, Thompson. Report to the East Tower at dawn tomorrow. Captain Reynolds will begin your advanced training immediately." As Marcus turned to leave, Field Marshal Sterling called his name one more time. "Thompson, one final thing. Your family will be told that you've been promoted to a special diplomatic security unit that requires extensive travel. They'll receive letters from you regularly, but those letters will be written by our correspondence specialists. Is that acceptable? Marcus felt a pang of sadness about deceiving his family, but he understood the necessity. Yes, ma'am. That's acceptable. Excellent. Welcome to the Shadow Guard, Agent Thompson. That evening, Marcus packed his few personal belongings and wrote what he knew would be his last genuine letter to his parents. He told them he loved them, that he was proud to serve the kingdom, and that everything he had learned from them about honor and courage was helping him become the person he was meant to be. As he sealed the envelope, Marcus realized that the farm boy who had struggled through basic training no longer existed. Tomorrow he would begin becoming someone entirely new, someone whose existence would be known to only a few people, but whose work would protect thousands. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he truly belonged exactly where he was supposed to be. 5 years had passed since Marcus began his secret life as a shadow guardian. He had completed dozens of dangerous missions, saved countless lives, and earned the complete trust of Field Marshal Sterling. But nothing had prepared him for what would become the most important moment of his entire career. Marcus was returning from a successful intelligence mission in the Northern Kingdoms when he received an urgent message to report directly to the Field Marshal's office. The message was marked with the highest priority code, something he had only seen twice before in 5 years. When he arrived at the castle, still wearing the rough clothes of a traveling merchant, Marcus noticed unusual activity everywhere. Extra guards patrolled the corridors, and senior officers hurried between meetings with serious expressions. Field Marshal Sterling was waiting for him with General Harrison and 2 other officials Marcus didn't recognize. Their faces were grave, and papers covered the desk in organized stacks. "Agent Thompson," Field Marshal Sterling said without her usual pleasantries, "we have a crisis that requires your immediate attention. Please sit down." Marcus took his seat, already mentally preparing for another dangerous assignment. In 5 years, he had infiltrated enemy courts, prevented 3 assassination attempts, and stopped 2 separate plots to poison the kingdom's water supply. Whatever this new crisis was, he felt ready to handle it. "What you're about to hear cannot leave this room under any circumstances," General Harrison began. "Yesterday we intercepted communications indicating that foreign agents have infiltrated the royal court at the highest levels." Marcus felt his blood run cold. An infiltration of the royal court would be catastrophic for the kingdom's security. Field Marshal Sterling continued the briefing. "We believe enemy spies have gained access to the king's personal schedule, security arrangements, and possibly even his private conversations. The threat level is unprecedented. What's our response plan?" Marcus asked, already thinking through the implications. "That's where your unique background becomes crucial," one of the unknown officials said. "We need someone who understands both regular guard procedures and advanced counterintelligence techniques. Someone who can operate inside the royal court without arousing suspicion." Field Marshal Sterling leaned forward. "Thompson, we're assigning you as the king's personal bodyguard, effective immediately. Your official story is that you're being promoted due to exceptional service records. Unofficially, your mission is to identify and neutralize the security breach." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Protecting the king meant that the entire kingdom's stability depended on his success or failure. "Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence, but wouldn't a more experienced agent be better suited for this assignment?" General Harrison shook his head. "Thompson, your combination of skills is exactly what we need. You have the protocol knowledge to function in the royal court, the combat abilities to handle direct threats, and the intelligence training to spot enemy agents. Most importantly, you're unknown to potential infiltrators." The next morning, Marcus put on the formal uniform of a royal bodyguard for the first time. The gold braiding, polished buttons, and ceremonial sword felt strange after years of wearing disguises and common clothes. As he walked toward the king's private chambers, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. From a struggling farm boy who could barely stay on a horse to the personal protector of the most important person in the kingdom, King Edward was a thoughtful man in his 50s who treated his guards with respect and genuine appreciation. When Field Marshal Sterling introduced Marcus as his new personal bodyguard, the king welcomed him warmly. "Thompson, I understand you've served with distinction in various capacities. I'm pleased to have you join my personal security detail." "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm honored to serve." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into his dual responsibilities. During the day, he learned the king's routines, preferences, and the complex protocols that governed royal life. During the night, he analyzed every person who had access to the king's schedule and private information. The investigation was painstaking work. Marcus had to suspect everyone while appearing to trust them completely. He studied the habits of servants, scribes, other guards, and even senior advisors, looking for any behavior that seemed unusual or suspicious. 3 weeks into his assignment, Marcus noticed something odd about Sir Edmund, one of the king's oldest advisors. Sir Edmund had served the crown for over 20 years and was completely above suspicion in everyone's mind. But Marcus observed that Sir Edmund always arrived early for private meetings with the king and often lingered afterward, apparently organizing papers. More concerning was Sir Edmund's habit of taking detailed notes during confidential discussions, notes that he claimed were for his personal records but which he always took with him when leaving the king's presence. Marcus began following Sir Edmund discreetly after court sessions. The advisor's routine seemed normal at first, but Marcus noticed that twice a week, Sir Edmund visited a small tavern in the lower city, where he met with a merchant named Frederick. Using his intelligence training, Marcus investigated Frederick and discovered that the merchant had recently arrived from the northern kingdoms and had no verifiable business history in the capital. Even more suspicious, Frederick's inn room contained items that suggested he was far wealthier than a simple traveling merchant should be. Marcus faced a delicate situation. Sir Edmund was one of the king's most trusted advisors, and accusing him of treason without absolute proof could destroy Marcus's career and create a political crisis. But if Sir Edmund really was feeding information to enemy agents, every day of delay put the king's life in greater danger. Instead of reporting his suspicions immediately, Marcus decided to gather definitive evidence. He arranged to be in the tavern during Sir Edmund's next meeting with Frederick, disguised as a common laborer enjoying an evening drink. What he overheard confirmed his worst fears. Sir Edmund was providing detailed information about the king's schedule, security arrangements, and even private conversations to Frederick, who was clearly an enemy intelligence operative. But Marcus also learned something that changed everything about the situation. Sir Edmund wasn't betraying his country for money or political gain. Frederick was holding Sir Edmund's daughter captive in the northern kingdoms, threatening to kill her if Sir Edmund didn't provide the requested information. Marcus now understood that Sir Edmund was a victim as much as a traitor. The advisor was desperately trying to save his daughter's life, even though it meant betraying his king and country. That night, Marcus requested an emergency meeting with Field Marshal Sterling. He explained everything he had discovered, including the complex motives behind Sir Edmund's betrayal. "This complicates matters significantly," Field Marshal Sterling said after hearing the complete report. "We can't simply arrest Sir Edmund without considering his daughter's safety, but we also can't allow the security breach to continue." "Ma'am, I have a proposal," Marcus said carefully. "What if we use this situation to feed false information to the enemy, while simultaneously rescuing Sir Edmund's daughter?" Field Marshal Sterling raised her eyebrows with interest. "Explain your plan." Marcus outlined a complex operation that would allow Sir Edmund to continue meeting with Frederick, while unknowingly passing along carefully crafted misinformation. Meanwhile, Shadow Guardian agents would locate and rescue Sir Edmund's daughter from her captors. The plan was risky and required perfect timing, but Field Marshal Sterling approved it after consulting with General Harrison and the king himself. 2 weeks later, the operation reached its climax. Marcus had spent days helping prepare false documents that would mislead enemy forces about the kingdom's military preparations. Sir Edmund, who had been secretly informed about the rescue operation, passed these documents to Frederick during their regular meeting. At the same time, Shadow Guardian agents successfully rescued Sir Edmund's daughter from her captors and brought her safely back to the capital. When Frederick and his associates realized they had been fed false information, they attempted to flee the kingdom immediately. But Marcus had anticipated this response, and royal guards were waiting at every possible exit point. The enemy spy ring was completely dismantled, and Sir Edmund was quietly pardoned by the king in recognition of the impossible situation he had faced as a father trying to protect his child. A month later, Field Marshal Sterling summoned Marcus to her office one final time. When he arrived, he found her standing at attention in full-dress uniform, along with General Harrison and several other senior officers. "Agent Thompson," Field Marshal Sterling announced formally, "by order of His Majesty the King, you are hereby promoted to the rank of captain and appointed as deputy commander of the Shadow Guardian unit." Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The promotion meant he would be Field Marshal Sterling's second in command for all of the kingdom's most sensitive security operations. Furthermore, she continued with a rare smile, "His Majesty has decided to bestow upon you the Order of the Golden Griffin, the highest honor that can be awarded to a member of the Royal Guard." As Field Marshal Sterling pinned the golden medal to